Pinocchio Chapter 19. Pinocchio has been lucky until now at keeping his gold pieces, but it seems that the law is not on his side. Will Pinocchio ever learn his lesson? If the marionette had been told to wait a day instead of 20 minutes, the time could not have seemed longer to him. He walked impatiently to and fro, and finally turned his nose toward the Field of Wonders. And as he walked with hurried steps, his heart beat with an excited tick-tack, tick-tack, just as if it were a wall clock. And his busy brain kept thinking, what if, instead of 1,000, I should find 2,000? Or, instead of 2,000, I should find 5,000, or 100,000. I'll build myself a beautiful palace with 1,000 stables filled with 1,000 wooden horses to play with, a cellar overflowing with lemonade and ice cream soda, and a library of candies and fruits, cakes and cookies. Thus, amusing himself with his fancies, he came to the field. There he stopped to see if by chance a vine filled with gold coins was in sight. But he saw nothing. He took a few steps forward, and still nothing. He stepped into the field. He went up to the place where he had dug the hole and buried the gold pieces. Again, nothing. Pinocchio became very thoughtful, and, forgetting his good manners altogether, he pulled a hand out of his pocket and gave his head a thorough scratching. As he did so, he heard a hearty burst of laughter close to his head. He turned sharply, and there, just above him, on the branch of a tree, sat a large parrot, busily preening his feathers. "What are you laughing at?" Pinocchio asked peevishly. "I'm laughing because, in preening my feathers, I tickle myself under the wings." The marionette did not answer. He walked to the brook, filled his shoe with water, and once more sprinkled the ground which covered the gold pieces. Another burst of laughter, even more impertinent than the first, was heard in the quiet field. "Well?" cried the marionette, angrily this time. "May I know, Mr. Parrot, what amuses you so?" "I'm laughing at those simpletons who believe everything they hear and will allow themselves to be caught so easily in the trap set for them." "Do you perhaps mean me?" "I certainly do mean you, poor Pinocchio, you who are such a little silly as to believe that gold can be sown in a field just like beans or squash. I too believe that once, and today I am very sorry for it. Today, but too late. I have reached the conclusion that in order to come by money honestly, one must work and know how to earn it with hand or brain." "I don't know what you're talking about," said the marionette, who was beginning to tremble with fear. "Too bad. I'll explain myself better," said the parrot. "While away in the city, the fox and the cat returned here in a great hurry. They took the 4 gold pieces which you have buried and ran away as fast as the wind. If you can catch them, you're a brave one." Pinocchio's mouth opened wide. He would not believe the parrot's words, and began to dig away furiously at the earth. He dug and he dug till the hole was as big as himself, but no money was there. Every penny was gone. In desperation, he ran to the city and went straight to the courthouse to report the robbery to the magistrate. The judge was a monkey, a large gorilla venerable with age. A flowing white beard covered his chest, and he wore gold-rimmed spectacles from which the glasses had dropped out. The reason for wearing these, he said, was that his eyes had been weakened by the work of many years. Pinocchio, standing before him, told his pitiful tale word by word. He gave the names and the descriptions of the robbers, and begged for justice. The judge listened to him with great patience. A kind look shone in his eyes. He became very much interested in the story. He felt moved. He almost wept. When the marionette had no more to say, the judge put out his hand and rang a bell. At the sound, 2 large mastiffs appeared, dressed in carabineers' uniforms. Then the magistrate, pointing to Pinocchio, said in a very solemn voice, "This poor simpleton has been robbed of 4 gold pieces. Take him, therefore, and throw him into prison." The marionette, on hearing this sentence passed upon him, was thoroughly stunned. But the 2 officers clapped their paws on his mouth and hustled him away to jail. There he had to remain for 4 long, weary months, and if it had not been for a very lucky chance, he probably would have just had to stay there longer. For, my dear children, you must know that it happened just then that the young emperor who ruled over the city of Simple Simons had gained a great victory over his enemy, and in celebration thereof he had ordered illuminations, fireworks, shows of all kind, and best of all, the opening of all prison doors. "If the others go, I go too," said Pinocchio to the jailer. "Not you," answered the jailer. "You are one of those." "I beg your pardon," interrupted Pinocchio. "I too am a thief?" "In that case, you are also free," said the jailer, taking off his cap. He bowed low and opened the door of the prison, and Pinocchio ran out and away, with never a look backward. And that was chapter 19 of Pinocchio. Well, that's justice for you. Pinocchio has been set free from the law. Let's see what mishap may befall him in the next chapter of Pinocchio on Pinocchio. Chapter 20. Pinocchio, now free from prison, meets the nice fairy again. But will his life be less dangerous? Let's find out. Fancy the happiness of Pinocchio on finding himself free. Without saying yes or no, he fled from the city and set out on the road that was to take him back to the house of the lovely fairy. It had rained for many days, and the road was so muddy that, at times, Pinocchio sank down almost to his knees. But he kept on bravely. Tormented by the wish to see his father and his fairy sister with azure hair, he raced like a greyhound. As he ran, he was splashed with mud, even to his cap. "How unhappy I have been," he said to himself. "And yet I deserve everything, for I am certainly very stubborn and stupid. I will always have my own way. I won't listen to those who love me and who have more brains than I. But from now on, I'll be different, and I'll try to become a most obedient boy. I have found out, beyond any doubt whatever, that disobedient boys are certainly far from happy, and that in the long run they always lose out. I wonder if father is waiting for me. Will I find him at the fairy's house? It is so long, poor man, since I have seen him, and I do so want his love and his kisses. And will the fairy ever forgive me for all I have done? She who has been good to me, and to whom I owe my life. Can there be a worse or more heartless boy than him anywhere?" As he spoke, he stopped suddenly, frozen with terror. What was the matter? An immense serpent lay stretched across the road. a serpent with a bright green skin, fiery eyes which glowed and burned, and a pointed tail that smoked like a chimney. How frightened was poor Pinocchio! He ran back wildly for half a mile, and at last settled himself atop a heap of stones to wait for the serpent to go on his way and leave the road clear for him. He waited an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, but the serpent was always there, and even from afar one could see the flash of his red eyes and the column of smoke which rose from his long, pointed tail. Pinocchio, trying to feel very brave, walked straight up to him and said in a sweet, soothing voice, "I beg your pardon, Mr. Serpent. Would you be so kind as to step aside to let me pass?" He might as well have talked to a wall. The serpent never moved. Once more in the same sweet voice he spoke. "You must know, Mr. Serpent, that I am going home where my father is waiting for me. It is so long since I have seen him. Would you mind very much if I passed?" He waited for some sign of an answer to his questions, but the answer did not come. On the contrary, the green serpent, who had seemed until then wide awake and full of life, became suddenly very quiet and still. His eyes closed and his tail stopped smoking. "Is he dead, I wonder?" said Pinocchio, rubbing his hands together happily. Without a moment's hesitation, he started to step over him, but he had just raised one leg when the serpent shot up like a spring, and the marionette fell head over heels backwards. He fell so awkwardly that his head stuck in the mud, and there he stood with his legs straight up in the air. At the sight of the marionette kicking and squirming like a young whirlwind, the serpent laughed so heartily and so long that at last he burst an artery and died on the spot. Pinocchio freed himself from his awkward position and once more began to run in order to reach the fairy's house before dark. As he went, the pangs of hunger grew so strong that, unable to withstand them, he jumped into a field to pick a few grapes that tempted him. Woe to him! No sooner had he reached the grapevine than crack went his legs. The poor marionette was caught in a trap set there by a farmer for some weasels which came every night to steal his chickens. And that was chapter 20 of Pinocchio. Poor Pinocchio escaped the nasty serpent, but has been trapped again. Can he escape? Pinocchio, chapter 21. Pinocchio has been caught in the farmer's trap. Will he be any use to the farmer? Pinocchio, as you may well imagine, began to scream and weep and beg. But all was of no use, for no houses were to be seen, and not a soul passed by on the road. Night came. A little because of the sharp pain in his legs, a little because of the fright at finding himself alone in the darkness of the field, the marionette was about to faint, when he saw a tiny glowworm flickering by. He called to her and said, "Dear little glowworm, will you set me free?" "Poor little Pinocchio," replied the glowworm, stopping to look at him with pity. "How came you to be caught in this trap?" "I stepped into this lonely field to take a few grapes and—" "Are the grapes yours?" "No." "Who has taught you to take things that do not belong to you?" "I was hungry." Hunger, my boy, is no reason for taking something which belongs to another. It's true! It's true! Cried Pinocchio in tears. I won't do it again! Just then the conversation was interrupted by approaching footsteps. It was the owner of the field who was coming on tiptoes to see if, by chance, he had caught the weasels, which had been eating his chickens. Great was his surprise when, on holding up his lantern, he saw that, instead of a weasel, he had caught a boy. "Ah, you little thief!" said the farmer in an angry voice. "So you are the one who steals my chickens!" "Not I! No!" cried Pinocchio, sobbing bitterly. "I came here only to take a very few grapes." "He who steals my grapes may very easily steal chickens also. Take my word for it, I'll give you a lesson that you'll remember for a long while." He opened the trap, grabbed the marionette by the collar, and carried him to the house. He flung him to the ground, put a foot on his neck, and said to him roughly, "It is too late now, and it's time for bed. Tomorrow we'll settle matters. In meantime, since my watchdog died today, you may take his place and guard my hen house." No sooner said than done. He slipped a dog collar around Pinocchio's neck and tightened it so that it would not come off. A long iron chain was tied to the collar. The other end of the chain was nailed to the wall. "If tonight it should happen to rain," said the farmer, "you can sleep in that little doghouse nearby, where you will find plenty of straw for a soft bed. It has been Melampo's bed for 3 years, and it will be good enough for you. And if by any chance any thieves should come, be sure to bark." After this last warning, the farmer went into the house and closed the door and barred it. Poor Pinocchio, huddled close to the doghouse, more dead than alive from cold, hunger, and fright. Now and again he pulled and tugged at the collar, which nearly choked him, and cried out in a weak voice, "I deserve it! Yes, I deserve it! I've been nothing but a truant and a vagabond. I have never obeyed anyone, and I have always done as I pleased. If I were only like so many others, and had studied and worked and stayed with my poor old father, I should not find myself here, now, in this field, in the darkness, taking the place of a farmer's watchdog. Oh, if I could start all over again! But what is to be done can't be undone. I must be patient." After this little sermon to himself, which came from the very depths of his heart, Pinocchio went into the doghouse and fell asleep. And that was Pinocchio Chapter 21. At last Pinocchio has seen the error of his ways. Will he get another chance to prove he can be a good boy?